Hello, thank you. Hello, thank you for joining us for this session. My name is Dr. Elise Jordan, Head of Research Engagement and Learning at Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas. I'll be moderating this session for you. I'm glad to welcome you and the presenters. The presenters will introduce themselves after a few house cleaning items. So let's go over a few logistic items. This session is being recorded. Captions are available during this session by clicking on Live CC button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Thank you, Javier, for providing the captions. Please use the Q&A feature for any presentation questions. You can choose to do this anonymously. There will be a 10 to 15-minute Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please use the chat feature for general comments or technical issues. Shanti will be monitoring the chat for any questions or comments. Shanti will also be adding some links into the chat. First link is a collaboration resource sharing. If you think of related readings, podcast videos, or something else, please share it with us in COM Resource Soterio or in the chat. One of our volunteers will drop this information in the chat. Second link is our conference code of conduct. I will be turning things over to our presenters now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Matrix Mavens, visualizing priorities to promote team transparency and project monitoring. My name is Harriet Wintermute, and I'm the chair of the Acquisitions, Cataloging, Metadata, and Electronic Resources Department, which is abbreviated ACME at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Before I go ahead with our presentation, I just wanted to recognize and give kudos to the previous presentation. They talked about the guiding principles on workload management, which is a very important topic and relates to ours here today. Hopefully we can also help those folks who were at the last one and this one. And now we will start our presentation with Heather.
All right, thank you, Harriet. My name is Heather Campbell. I'm the head of metadata services at Iowa State University. And in this presentation today, we will introduce the priority matrix, which is an active tool that builds transparency and alignment in team members and their daily work and projects. So we're going to cover the reasons for using a priority matrix, who can use one, what it is exactly, and some options or tools for creating one. And finally, we'll close with two use cases, one from the Iowa State University Library and one from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln libraries. So to start, why use a priority matrix? And here are just a few reasons that we'll go over: transparency, decision-making, and workload management, as Harriet mentioned. The first reason, transparency. So a priority matrix visualizes all of a team's projects and tasks, which ensures that they're visible to all members of the team. And moreover, the matrix shows not only the tasks and projects, but the importance and urgency of those listed tasks. The second reason is decision-making. So the act of populating a priority matrix requires team members to determine which activities are important and which are urgent. This exercise promotes team discussions of what makes a project or a task important or urgent. So for example, is it an essential function, or are the outcomes merely nice to have? Does it meet a strategic goal? Are stakeholders expecting an outcome? Is there a hard deadline? The matrix also helps team members to prioritize and plan their work by helping them to decide such things as What should I do now? What can be scheduled for later in the year? Can I commit to anything additional at this time? The third reason is workload management. With a regularly updated priority matrix, managers, supervisors, and team leads can monitor the team's overall workload. This is especially important when a team's work comprises many concurrent activities, including routine tasks as well as projects in various stages. A priority matrix also summarizes the team's priorities by sorting the activities by importance and urgency. This kind of summary can help answer such questions as, do any urgent or important activities need more resources? Can resources be reallocated from less important or less urgent tasks? Are any urgent or important activities at risk of not being completed on time? Is now a good time to start a new project? Could new activities be planned for later in the year? Can anything be dropped or put on hold? Next, who can use a priority matrix? As the previous slides implied, priority matrices can be used by anyone and everyone in a work team. Ideally, multiple team members will collaborate on the creation and maintenance of a priority matrix for their work group. This collaboration helps to ensure that everyone agrees on and understands the importance and urgency of the various tasks and projects. Managers, supervisors, and departments of leaders or units also can use the priority matrix to get a high-level overview of their entire team's activities at a glance. This visualization can help them to monitor their team's workload again and understand its priorities, provided the matrix is updated regularly. Project managers also could use a priority matrix for organizing multiple subtasks of a complex project. And in addition, interdepartmental colleagues, stakeholders, and administrators might appreciate the transparency and accountability offered by priority matrices shared by their adjacent or subordinate teams. So now that we've provided several reasons for teams to use a priority matrix, let's delve into what they look like. The standard form of the matrix is credited to the task management system of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who said in 1954, "I have two kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important, and the important are never urgent." Although this quotation implies that the two categories don't intersect, the typical Eisenhower matrix sorts tasks into four quadrants. So urgent and important at the top left, important and not urgent at the top right, not important but urgent at the lower left, and not important and not urgent in the lower right. And the classic labels for these quadrants are, starting at the top left, do, which means do this thing immediately. Going to the right, decide, so plan to do this next or later on. Top or bottom left, delegate, ask somebody else to do it. And then bottom right, delete, eliminate these tasks or don't do them at all. And if you're familiar with the Moscow prioritization of requirements, MSCW, these quadrants also can be mapped to that system. So the top left quadrant would be must do, then going on to should do, then next could do, and lastly won't do. In practice, though, if you're using a priority matrix to capture all of a team's projects and tasks, you might balk at labeling some of the activities as not important. Also, you might not be able to delegate or delete activities, especially those that could be performed only by your team, or maybe there are activities that have been assigned to your team by an administrator. So in that case, you could temper the Eisenhower quadrant categories by imagining them more as comparisons rather than binaries. So more or less important or more or less urgent. And you also could modify the quadrant labels to focus on prioritization and resource allocation rather than delegation or deletion. And moreover, if tasks are being completed concurrently by different subsets of your team members, you don't necessarily need to assign a particular order to the quadrants, 1, 2, 3, 4. So with this more realistic approach, the quadrants could be labeled as, at the top left would be your top priority. So you'd allocate the most resources here because these are important and time sensitive. Going to the right, these are high priority, but they're not time sensitive. So in other words, you could complete these over time. Maybe you could schedule recurring blocks of time to work on these tasks. And you'd want to give these activities more resources than the ones on the bottom. On the bottom left, then, these are less important, but they also still have a timeline. So they don't require as many resources, but you still have to keep that target date in mind. And lastly, on the bottom right, this is your low priority. This could be a parking lot or a set of tasks to do as time permits, and you'd give the fewest resources here. All right, so I'll hand it back to Harriet.
Now I'm going to cover some of the different options that you can use as tools to build your priority matrix. As you can see, there's lots of different options. There's some old-fashioned analog things like spreadsheets, or there's also digital tools. I'm also going to touch on Google Sheets at the end more in detail. You can go to the next one. So whiteboard is one option. You can have a simple analog version, which can work for some teams. It's a good way to onboard new people and introduce them to the idea of using this matrix with your people. You can populate it with things if you have a small team also. And you want to just do a workflow every week, you could say, this is what we're working on this week, and figure it out together. That's one option. You can go to the next slide. Another one that is more digital, the other one was analog, this one is a digital. You can use another whiteboard out there. This is called, maybe your team is remote, and so you'd want a digital tool. This one is called Miro. If you search their templates for different boards, I found 3 that are really fit into this Eisenhower matrix, and it would be easy for you to just populate your tasks in these. The nice thing about the Miro app is that it's educational based. So if you have an institutional subscription, you could probably get this for free. Next, talking about Microsoft Excel, there's a few different ways that you can set it up. The first way is just a simple manual method. That's the simplest way using an Excel spreadsheet. So you could have just 4 quadrants: urgent, not urgent, important, not important, and then you manually put in the tasks. But understand that you can move them around. You could have each person do one for their individual workload. There's all different kinds of ways that it would work. Another option with Microsoft Excel is you can use pivot tables. I didn't use a different slide for that because they look pretty much the same. But with pivot tables, you can set it up, and then each block is a pivot table. So you'd have to have 4 pivot tables. You would use the tasks as the values for the pivot tables. And then when you filter it according to each variable, then, like, for example, the upper left, you would filter for urgent and important. On the right, again, you would filter the upper right to match important and not urgent. And so you would do that for each of the 4 elements. It's a little bit clunky because you would have to update the list frequently, and you also have to make sure that to refresh each table at the same, frequently to keep them updated. Excuse me. Another option with Excel, which is for more advanced users, is called a VBA, visual-based application, or Visual Basic application. And so this is for computer clients. I would say I tried to do this myself. I found some examples. I've even tried on ChatGPT to get a script for how to write this, but I could never get it to look exactly the way I wanted. I'm sure there's something out there, or if you're an expert Excel user, you could use VBA to make your own Eisenhower matrix. But that's probably, you can also do arrays or other things for advanced users with Excel. Next slide, please. Smart Sheets. The software SaaS software has these smart sheets. You could also use this as an institutional user, so you might subscribe to this through your institution already. This is a web-based dashboard, and it's called, they have an individual, so it makes this matrix based. So if you see on the right, you have the tasks, and then, underneath it, you'll notice that on their form, the Smart Sheets form, they flip the,
The columns and the rows.
the columns and the rows. Thank you. I couldn't think of my words. So like the not important and important are on the top versus the Eisenhower matrix. So just be aware of that when you're setting it up, that on Smart Sheets, it's the opposite. But that could be an option for people to use as individuals. Next. Another web tool is called Priority Matrix, and it's from a company called Appfluence. This is a complete complete app based on this model. It's a very rich, there's different filters, there's different views. It integrates with Outlook. Most of the time it does cost money, but there is a free version that allows 5 members on the team with 5 projects at one time and 100 tasks. So if that applies to you, you could use the free version. Next. The last one I want to cover in a little bit more detail is Google Sheets. Obviously, this is a spreadsheet, but there's 2 steps to set up your priority matrix using Google Sheets. I'm going to talk about, this is how I learned how to do it. I went to an ER&L talk in 2020, and I learned about this from Jill
Locascio, maybe?
Locascio, thank you. So she's the one who invented this, these slides or this setup, and I want to show you how I did this. So if you go to the next slide, I'll explain more how to create the matrix. The first step, you'll just start with a new Google Sheet. And you have the front tab, the front worksheet open, and then you move to the second tab to create another sheet, and that would just be a task list. So you want to have at least 3 columns. The first column is tasks, and then second says important, and the third column says urgent, yes or no. And then you just populate your tasks. You need to have a minimum of the 3 columns on this one. Once you set up that task list, you can add as many tasks as you want to onto that worksheet. Next slide. Once you do that, then you go back to that front tab, the first worksheet, and you make a pivot table there. Your pivot table, you want to make sure that you point to the items in the list on the second tab. So you'll have those 3 columns, the tasks important and urgent, so A, B, and C, and it will pull the values from those 3 columns to create your pivot table. And then next, in the rows, you put important. Next. On the next column, you put urgent. And then the last column, you need to have a field that's a calculation. This is the really cool part, and this is the part I learned about from that presentation I watched, because it will create a formula for your calculations, and then it's called join character 10 task. Once you use that formula, it will pull everything from the task list that you've typed in, and it will automatically populate the pivot table to set up the priority matrix based on how you typed each task, whether it was important or urgent or not. This is really nice for a dynamic setup, because you can update the task list, and every time you do so, it will automatically update the pivot table and your matrix. Before I worked at the University of Nebraska, I worked at Iowa State. And this is something that we used there. We found that it was very helpful to our team. And so now Heather is going to explain. Oh, now I'm going to go give it over to Heather to explain how they used it at Iowa State.
All right, thanks, Harriet. So you can see here, based on that pivot table that Harriet explained in the previous slides, this is the result. This is what the priority matrix ends up looking like in Google Sheets. And you can see that when we first started using this at Iowa State, we had a lot of urgent and important tasks, the due immediately with the most resources kind of tasks, followed by quite a few important but not urgent tasks. And then we had a fewer urgent but not important, or not important and not urgent tasks. And in this workbook, we had a number of sheets in the Google workbook. The first one is this matrix. The second one we labeled current, as in current tasks or current projects, and that is the task list that is used to populate this sheet. We also had a few additional sheets that weren't used in the creation of this priority matrix, but they were used for reference when we were looking over the task list and the matrix. So we had a future tab that was a way of tracking upcoming projects or tasks that we weren't ready to start working on. So again, those didn't display in the matrix, but we had a list of them to keep track of. We also had a completed sheet, so if something was finished, we would copy it out of the current sheet and put it in the completed sheet, and that way it didn't display in the matrix any longer either. And then lastly, we had a definitions and key sheet where we explained what we meant exactly by urgent and important, and what was on each sheet in the workbook. Here is a screenshot of what the current sheet, the task list, looked like. So you can see the tasks are listed in column A, column B is our important column, column C is the urgent one. And these remaining columns, they also don't display in the priority matrix, but they can be used when you're looking at your tasks in this view. So we added a deadline one for those things that did have a date. We put the lead person on each project or task, if there were other members of the team who were working on it, if we had any partners or stakeholders, and then the last one was whether it was a routine task, an ongoing thing, or a one-time project. So we could review this in our department meetings or on our own at any time to get an overview of what we were currently working on. And all of the team members were encouraged to update the matrix with new projects or tasks that came along. And our meetings were a good time too to make sure that we didn't miss anything that was completed, so we could take it off of here and move it to the completed sheet. So after Harriet moved on to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, I became the head of the Metadata Services Department. And after a certain time, I decided I wanted to be able to see all of the tasks broken out by unit. So we have 2 units in our department. One is cataloging, which does traditional MARC cataloging, and then we have a metadata unit that does non-MARC metadata creation. And so I decided to replace the important category with unit. And this was a pretty easy change. All I did was in the current sheet, I added a column for unit. And so the values were either both cataloging or metadata. And then I changed the row value from important to unit. And that was the only thing I did to change it to this type of view instead. You can see the columns are still urgent, yes or no, and that special formula, the join character 10 task thing, that remained the same as well. That's what makes all the tasks list together in each quadrant. This approach has worked well at a time when we have a lot of important projects being undertaken by the different units and some shared by both of our units. I found that when all of the tasks are perceived as important, urgency has been the more significant factor. So this has worked well in that instance. A bonus feature, if you're using Google Sheets, is that you can easily create a timeline view of all the tasks if you add date columns to the task list. Now this doesn't go in the matrix. It won't display in your matrix. It'll be a separate tab, a separate sheet in the workbook, but it's very easy to set up. So all you have to do is add a start date and an end date or deadline, whatever you want to call it. So a start date and an end date, and you populate those dates. And then in Google Sheets, there's a menu called Insert, and you go Timeline. And Google Sheets will ask you, is this the range you want to use? It probably will guess correctly. And then you click OK. And the result is this Gantt chart view of all of the tasks that have associated dates. So you can look month by month, and it gives you a sense of the duration and when things are happening at the same time. And again, note that anything that doesn't have dates won't appear in this timeline. Okay, now I'll hand it back to Harriet.
Okay. So I've been working at Nebraska for about a year now, and UNL is not a Google Workspace environment. They're very embedded in the Microsoft environment. We have SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams. And that's where we find all of our information and tasks. So I'm kind of limited to Excel at this institution. And so for that reason, I haven't implemented the 4-quadrant style matrix yet with my team. I am not really satisfied with how it looked in Excel, but eventually I would like to get there. So I started pulling things together when I onboarded my department leaders just to get them comfortable with the idea of this priority matrix and the key terms of are things important and are things urgent. So during this process, we've tried to capture all of the different projects that we're involved in. And so I'm trying to follow local practices. Overall, it's working really well. I think you can see in this screenshot what it looks like. Like Heather mentioned, I have more columns off to the right. I have the due dates or deadlines. I have a tab for current, like she said at the bottom. So projects that we're working on right now. I have a future tab for things that are coming or ideas of things that we want to work on in the future. We also have a completed tab for things that have finished and we're no longer working on. I also have the key, just like they have at Iowa State, which explains all the terminology in the sheets. Next slide. One local thing that they use at Nebraska is a practice here. When I noticed when I got here, the previous dean had already started using this model called the RACI matrix, which is also called, this is like a method to identify all of the different roles and which things have been assigned and to help people understand their roles in each project and workflow. So I guess it's like a matrix within a matrix. Nevertheless, the RACI, some of you might be familiar with what that means. R means people who are responsible to do the work, do the tasks. A is who's accountable for the task, which is the people who are making the decisions or the leaders who are assigning the tasks. C stands for consulted. Those are the stakeholders who have some expertise or who know other parts or participants on the task. So those are the people that we consult with to make sure that we understand what their needs are. The last one, I, is informed, and that tends to focus more on like outside stakeholders. For example, like if there are people at the front desk who need to be aware that something has changed, once we've finished a project, we inform those stakeholders, the external stakeholders, about the results of our project. So you can see the rest of my spreadsheet here. I assign different teams who's responsible, and each line of the RACI, each column of the RACI. Next. Another local practice that I'm trying to incorporate right now is when I started, they showed the team, when I started with the team leadership, they wanted to separate out the teams, the units. So their suggestion was to have a different spreadsheet for each unit. And I really didn't want to do that. I really wanted to have it all in one place. So we'll see how this goes. But the way that I'm trying it out right now is to use a team code to identify which team is responsible for which project. So for example, if it says ACQ acquisitions, that's a project related to ordering or acquisitions. Other examples, department means it could be multiple units are involved in the project. CM is for cataloging and metadata team. ERM for the electronic resources management team. EXT stands for external stakeholders. Sometimes we participate or help somehow with things in other departments, projects in other departments. The last one is LDR, which is just tasks or projects for the department leaders. So using this matrix that I'm working with right now, I'm only working with the department leaders to get them familiar with the process right now, but eventually I would like to onboard all the members of the department and have everyone fully invested in updating and adding tasks. This is definitely a work in progress. And now that I've seen Heather's example, it's kind of made me think about trying to do something similar with my department. So I might call it areas of activities instead of teams. I'm trying to figure it out because sometimes like a project will start with one team and hand it off to another. So I feel like 6 teams right now might be too many. So it's a work in progress. Okay, next. So just to review overall, we've added some examples of some simple Google Sheet matrices that you can refer to if you want to try a few of them. There's many more out there for examples as well. And then the full citation for Jill Locasio's presentation where we learned about this with the formula. There's also some templates. I couldn't include everything, but I saw in the chat, like there's Trello, there's all different kinds of apps and everything out there with project management software. There's also templates that you can download. There's just many things available. You can even see tutorials on YouTube if you prefer to be a more visual learner. So that's overall everything that we wanted to talk to you about today. Thank you for your attention. Heather and I are here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Heather and Harriet. So the big thing is, are you sharing your slides with the audience?
Yes, we will.
Okay, so that was the big question. And I think just so we don't run out of time, I'm going to jump around a little bit on the questions. Can you show the directions for the timeline again or link to the slides? That was one of the later questions that came in.
Sure, I'll just jump back to that slide.
From an anonymous poster, my team is somewhat documenting how might you recommend selling folks on the benefits of using priority matrix? Who might be reluctant to invest in time in updating one?
I can start, and then if Heather wants to jump in.
Sure.
Okay. I understand. Sometimes I feel like that's where I've been with our department leadership at times, just trying to explain to people how this is a living document. And I try to sit one-on-one with people individually and help them think through what projects we have, why we have them, whether they're important and urgent. I think the one-on-one meetings really help convince people a lot because it gets them to think through all the steps, and it also helps me understand their perspective. Sometimes they think of something that I haven't. So working together one-on-one has been really important for me. Another thing I want to emphasize is that I'm not the decision maker. I'm trying to give them ownership of the matrix because everyone is involved. Everyone can see it. That's the part about the transparency. It's those people's duties that we're talking about in their tasks. and their due dates and everything. So it's not like I'm the person, I'm the decision maker. I'm just giving them this to do. So it's a slow process, but I think it's going well. Heather?
Yeah, I totally get that too, because it does take time to, it takes time to keep track of your projects and activities. It just does. So you have to learn to take some time out of your week to do it. But I think that this method is simple compared to some others. You don't have to install a big new fancy project management software system or write a lot of technical documentation on a wiki. I mean, you can obviously do those things, but this is just rows. So you have a name of a task and who's doing it. It's the essentials, it's the basics. So if nothing else, it's a good way of just writing down, keeping track of what you're doing. And then if you do save what you've completed, that also, when you're done with things, makes it easy to collect for an evaluation or a report. To me, it's a simple method for keeping track of things.
Okay. Oh, I like this idea of having priority matrix. At the yearly review, maybe also a team might work at a smaller scale, like a semester or align with annual matrix. And I agree with that for sure. I wonder, second person speaking, I wonder too if having a living matrix for a big project, things must be done to launch a new program or prep for renovation, can be integrated with other planning and communication approaches. Do you have any comments maybe about that comment? No. Okay.
Well,
Go ahead, Heather.
oh, sure. So the question seems to be, if I understand it, can you?
It's just making more of a comment
Oh,
about priority matrix being used for a yearly review, or you can make it into a smaller scale, like semester, or even align it with the annual matrix. Is the first speaker. The second speaker was saying this living matrix for big projects, such as a new program or prepping for a renovation, can be integrated with other planning and communication approaches.
Those are both great ideas, I think. Yeah. It doesn't, since it is a living thing, it's not static, so you could use it. You could have multiple matrices and, finish one and then start another one. Or you could have, say you have a Trello board or some other system that you're using for managing a task in more detail. You could maybe have a column that links out to that project management system, like for that item or something like that. So this is a higher level, and then you could have a link out to your more detailed project management system. That's just an idea.
Okay. Do you have a template for the Sheets version that you can share openly? Thanks for considering it.
Yep, on the resources tab, there's an example of the Google Sheet there that will link to an example for you. And we'll send the slides. Let me see if I can copy that link into the chat. Let me do that.
Okay, and we have one more question or maybe statement. I find that I am often in a state of waiting. How do you label when you're waiting on a specific person? How do you label, I guess, how do you label the person that you're always waiting on? Heather or Harriet? Yeah.
I think as far as workflows go, that's how what you're talking about is in a workflow when you're waiting for someone else. Is that what you mean?
I think that's what they're saying, yes.
I think you could accept or take under the column where it says routine or one time, you could add a status that says waiting. So if it's an identifiable status, like you could either say, like if you show the example from Iowa State, Heather, like under the metadata where she used, yeah, this one.
So you
Oh,
could,
it doesn't show exactly, but are you still using that one that you set up before? Do you remember, Heather? The
yeah,
metadata?
we had another version of it at one point where instead of just the two statuses of routine, and one time we had routine and then we had more granular statuses. So we had like in progress, waiting on a decision. We had a number of statuses that we used. So yeah, that's an option.
Mike, any other questions? Well, thank you, Harriet, and Heather for joining us today to enlighten us about how to be more transparent in monitoring projects. I know I've taken some notes that I can take away from that because I always feel like we're so busy. And the last question that I ask, I'm always waiting. Even if I give a deadline, I'm always waiting. So this has been really important for me as a manager. And I hope everyone has taken a lot of stuff away from them. And I see people are giving you kudos. This is great. So hopefully you're checking that out. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr.
Yes,
Jordan. Thanks,
thank you
Harriet.
so much.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, Heather. Great, thank you. Thank you so much.